and it's Constitution Hill, one of the hurdling greats.
Constitution appeared all on his own. The other two were 100 yards behind him. We couldn't believe it was possible. He was very un-Henderson-like. Normally they complain that I don't run them enough and we don't bring them out, we're frightened to run them and this and that and the other. Just every year they're chipping away and taking away the novice chases. It's not a good incentive for people to go novice chasing.
Well, nice to be down here at Seven Barrows, a much more relaxed atmosphere now, Nicky, that the season's come to an end. We're already thinking about the new year, but you must have been really pleased with how things went for you and your team here last year. Second in the Chainers Championship, which is over £2.6 million, 9 Grade 1 wins, 90 winners in total. And I suppose the highlight of those would have been Constitution Hill supplying you with your 9th win in the Unibet Champion Hurdle. Just talk to me about him.
Him, yeah. Well, he is completely different to, I don't think to everything, but he was. And it was just nice that he continued where he'd left off at the end of last season. You never even, he was so bizarre last year, especially in the Supreme. You sort of worried all summer that, you've got to start again from scratch, and is it all still going to be the same? But from the word go in the fighting fifth and Christmas hurdles and things like that, there was nothing changed at all. He was just exactly the same. Didn't matter how you did it. He did it from the front. He'd come from behind. You could do anything, and he's just got such amazing pace, really, hasn't he? There is the dilemma as everybody's asking what we're going to do next. I mean, he's just so good at 2 miles. You wonder whether it's a good idea to go further, but he went a bit further at Aintree, and that was no problem. Anyway, he's out in the field.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, for those people that perhaps don't have the privilege of looking inside a yard and may not perhaps understand the workings of it, it's so hard to try and keep these horses 100% sound day in, day out. So as you said, to achieve what he did, it's sort of a remarkable testament to you and all your team here, and of course the horse himself.
Well, there you are. That's where you're incredibly lucky, because he never missed a day, and that for any horse you're incredibly lucky. I mean, they always, there's something lurking around there that upsets the whole thing. Obviously they've got to stay healthy. That's the most important thing, and he felt he was very resolute as far as that was concerned. We never had any issues with that. His track washes and everything were 100% clean the whole way through. He didn't tread on any stones. He didn't do this. He didn't knock anything. He was just dead straightforward. I mean, to be perfectly honest, any clown could train him when he's like that. If you've got a fit, sound and healthy horse, it's very simple. It's the problems that go behind it that make life so tricky. I don't think in either season, really, has he missed anything. Once you get him sort of built up during the summer, I mean, the summer months are pretty important to him. You have to put him back. This year he's gone out looking much better than he went out looking last year, let alone the year before, when it really was a skeleton. And since then he's thrived. I think he's got bigger and stronger, and it was just very straightforward.
And when we saw him win the Unibet Champion Hurdle, for you watching the race up in the stands with all your friends and family, what's the feeling like? I mean, it must be. Is it sort of a mix of nerves, anticipation, anxiety, and excitement? Oh,
it's horrible. He goes back to the sort of sprinter days when you're in a situation whereby anything but a spark, something special, is going to disappoint. But from the moment halfway down the hill when Nico let go of him and just said go, it was so electric. And you could even hear the crowd suddenly realise what had happened. He just suddenly took off and left State Man stood still. I mean, they just couldn't go with him. And it was extraordinary. And just the further he goes, the better he goes. The last hurdle was a little bit of I didn't really see it live. But it's an extraordinary thing. There's incredible photographs of him jumping the last because he's far too far away from it. Now, there was a shadow there, and there's no doubt he came up on the shadow, not on the hurdle. But the great thing was, because Nico had a completely fresh horse, he could go and, in the air, he's actually gone again, because he had to. He wasn't going to get there. But he actually sort of lifted himself. He virtually sprouted wings and said, "Christ, I've got to go further." And he does. And, it was great stuff. He's very special. You never want to sort of underestimate that, though, because, it was like Sprinter in those days. You think they're having easy races. They can't be having easy races. He's got this wonderful mind set, and that's his biggest weapon. He can cope with any situation. Nothing worries him. Nothing bothers him. On the open day here, he just ate grass when we took him to Sandown on the last day to parade, and he was parading as Horse of the Year. And, he just stood in the paddock and ate grass. Well, no horse in the world would do that if you took it into the paddock. Loudspeakers and everything everywhere and crowds everywhere, it would think it was going to race. This horse doesn't think about going racing. It says, well, this is quite nice grass. Do you think any horse has ever grazed the paddock at Sandown before? I think you wouldn't say no. It's not possible. It's simply ridiculous.
You touched there on the fact that you heard the gasps from the crowd when he was travelling so well at the top of the hill in the Unibet Champion Hurdle. Why do you think the crowd and racegoers have sort of just taken him under their wing? He's a superstar and a horse that's had very, very few runs.
Well, this is the thing, the likes of Sprinters and Altios, they'd won a dozen races before they became public. This horse has done it before the season even started. That was on the back of 3 last year. He had 4 this year. And it is, but it's the way he does it. I know Michael says, he said, honestly, I don't really own this horse anymore, do I? Of course he does, but he is public, and which is great. It's nice that people appreciate something that is very special and very, very good. And he is a bit unique literally because of his temperament. It is the most bizarre. I've absolutely no doubt it comes down from his sire, Blue Brazil. We've got a whole stack of them. They're all the same. You can do anything with them. Very seldom do you see a silly one. And even at the sales, you can tell them miles away. They're all just...
Well, talk to us a bit about how you came about sort of getting hold of him, because obviously it was through Barry Geraghty and your association with Michael Buckett. It's great for him, who's been with you for many, many years, but it's been well publicised. He turned down offers for him because if you're in racing, you want the best horse and be foolish to sell them, I suppose.
Barry been on to myself and Michael Buckett and said, Barry was ringing Michael, you've got to buy this horse, you've got to buy this horse. Then he ran in a point-to-point and got beaten, which slightly confused everybody. But Barry was adamant that he was good, so we were at Doncaster Sales and went in to see him. And I have to admit, no offence to Barry or Warren Ewing, who'd trained him. They were unlucky, I think, because he'd had an infection or something like that shortly before the sales. Had to have quite a lot of antibiotics. By the time he got to the sale, unfortunately, he did look pretty awful. And to be honest, it just put everybody off. Meanwhile, Barry's still on to Michael. Michael says, what do you think? And even Minty and I had quite a difference of opinion. And I said, well, look, we're going to have a go up to a point, but it's not going to be anywhere near what... And Barry knew he wasn't going to make anything like what he wanted, but I think he was very good because he knew that Michael and I were going to be there, and he knew that we were going to do it, and we were going to have a shot. He didn't know where we were coming in, but he didn't then go and put a stupid reserve on him, which he could easily have done and taken him home, put him back together again, and got the sort of rather the big bucks that he thought the horse was worth. Having said that, we were taking quite a big gamble. In most people's eyes, a huge gamble, because they couldn't believe that a horse like that could possibly, you could put him back together again. But with the help of Charlie Vigers, he went straight there. Well, virtually, I mean, we started him off, and it was all a matter of just rebuilding. And then, I mean, it's well documented when he came back in at the beginning of that first season, I thought the thing was useless. It was just asleep. It couldn't walk, it couldn't trot, it couldn't... Don't worry, he's always like this.
Why was Barry so confident?
He must have been doing some very good work before he ran into point-to-point.
Yeah.
And then he sent me pictures of his sort of 3-year-old daughter sat on him lying down in the stable. Well, you sort of got the drift that this horse is pretty sort of unfazed by anything. And, but to start with, I was ringing Barry quite a bit. I said, Barry, you told me this was good. It's a dope. And then there was one morning when I put somebody on him. I said, please, would you just give this thing a bit of a wake-up call, will you? And I mean, you didn't have to do it. I think it might have been James Bowen, but I can't remember. And we put him in behind 2 horses, and Charlie and I sat at the end of the gallop. And these 3 were meant, he was going to try and see if he could get it to join the other 2. Because up until then, it had not shown me any inclination it was going to join anything. And all of a sudden, we were stood at the top of the hill, and you could see that one horse was coming up on its own. And we thought something had gone wrong. Well, it hadn't gone wrong. It was just that, I think it was James, had suddenly found that there was a button, and if you press that button, off it goes. and here Constitution appeared all on his own. The other 2 were 100 yards behind him. We couldn't believe it was possible.
So then you were on the phone to Michael Buckley and said, actually, we might have a nice horse now.
Not quite that quickly, no. Better do this again.
But for Michael, I mean, he must have given him so much pleasure, and you as well, to see the pleasure that Michael got from Constitution.
Well, he was very good, not surprisingly. There were plenty of offers for him, and there must have been a temptation to take the money and run, but you're in racing for, as you say, Michael's been in it for a very, very long time. And yeah, he's been a great, great friend. And we've had some very good days. And quite a lot of these horses have come from Barry before. So there's been a relationship there between the 2 of them, as well as myself. And so it was very nice. Barry was, he came to see him nearly every time. And, he's been right behind us.
Okay, now I'm sure we're going to come back here in 3 or 4 months' time and do a season preview. So I'm going to ask you that question then. But I'm going to ask you a question now, and so one question, we want 1-word answer. Has he scored over fences yet?
No.
Okay, right. Jonbon. Jonbon been brilliant last season. Surprised for many that we saw him in the Celebration Chase, but he's done nothing wrong, and he is clearly another extremely exciting chaser.
Yeah, the Arkle went wrong, really. He didn't travel and jump. He didn't jump. It was softer ground, but anyway, we ironed all that out at Aintree. He was really good. And we kept the iron out for Sandown. That was a brave call, to be fair, because JP asked if he could get a Punchdown, and we were going to take on El Fabioso again. Well, I didn't fancy the travelling and running so quickly after Aintree. And I said, I'd rather not do Ireland, but I would seriously consider the Celebration Chase. Now it's very valuable at Grade 1. We've used it before. We used it as a novice with Luccia. What I really wanted to do was find out whether he was a 2-miler. Our inclination was, you'd need further. I was always going to go 2.5 at Aintree. But the difference between the 2.5 and the 2 was enormous. The 2-mile race was miles easier than the 2.5 novice. So we stuck at the 2 miles, and he was very good. But we needed to know that it was very un-Henderson-like to... Normally they complain that I don't run them enough and we don't bring them out. We're frightened to run them and this and that and the other. And you could easily have I'd said to Charlie Morlock all week, the week before, and some of it I was in Ayr and all around the country, and Paddy, who rode him every day, I said, just when we did his track wash, we were taking his bloods and his temperatures and weights and everything, trying to find a reason not to run him in the celebration chase. And I couldn't find one solitary reason. And JP simply said, well, you know, you're the trainer, I pay you to be, now it's your turn to do some work. It's your decision. And as I say, I couldn't find a reason not to. But I did want to do it if we could, because I wanted to find out where to start next season. Is he a 2-miler or does he want more? And the only way you're going to find that is by taking on the top 2-milers, which is what he did. And he beat them, and beat them comprehensively too. So it not only worked, thank goodness, but it's also helped us into next year. So I think you could take it that he'll be starting in the Tingle Creek.
Because 6 months ago, everybody was sort of suggesting that, you know, you'd be looking at Ryanair and that, you know,
yes, you
much
would, yeah.
further. But
yeah.
as you said, he's proven that he's not short of pace.
I mean, him and El Fabiolo, they'd had a good tussle at Aintree the year before over hurdles, and we came out on top. Okay, he beat us at Cheltenham, but Jonbon hadn't jumped with any fluency at all. But we managed to get that right, both at Aintree and Sandown, and that was satisfying.
And we saw him at Sandown, and I think it's just becoming normal for him now. He does tend to get a bit warm in the preliminaries, but it clearly doesn't affect him at all in the race.
He's like that. He's extraordinary. He's a bit freaky. Never got clipped all winter. Never. He had a summer coat on him the whole way through. He looked amazing. And he went home, and I mean, JP sent him home. JP ran out at night. He said, "You wouldn't know this horse has had a race. It's just had 2." Very quickly, bang, bang, Aintree, Sandown, you know. He said, "You wouldn't know he'd been anywhere." And he just travelled over on the ferry and got back, and, you know, they all said he looks great. He's looked remarkable all season.
So first port of call at this stage would be the Tingle
Well,
Creek.
you'd think so, wouldn't you? It's the obvious place to go. I mean, you're going to meet those same sort of horses again, but what he did in the celebration chase was enough to show you that he'd got plenty of pace, and he could quicken off it too.
How important is Aidan in this whole sort of team?
Well, I mean, he's got on with him very well. I mean, there was he didn't jump very well at Cheltenham, and apart from one mistake, which was a pretty rattly mistake, just going down the back at Sandown, which sort of, instead of bowling along, we suddenly gone back to 4th, and you think, whoa, this has got us on the back foot. But he was very soon back on the front foot.
Aidan seems to ride him with a lot of confidence, doesn't he? He seems to know.
I think you have to give this horse his head. Just let him go and jump, and then he's good.
Okay. Speaking of jockeys that are pretty good and know their horses, Nicky de Boinville, of course, rides Shishkin. Now, Shishkin is a for many, he's a bit of an enigma, but when he's good, he is absolutely brilliant. So we saw in the Ascot Chase, and then again when he came back after defeating the Ryanair at Aintree. I mean, you must have had a few sleepless nights over him over the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. It was an up and down, a disappointingly sloppy run in the Tingle Creek, and he looked woefully one-paced, whereas a year ago he would have winged round there with them. So the obvious thing was to go up in trip. We went to the Ascot Chase. That worked really well. That was a great performance. The Ryanair was a massive disappointment. He didn't, again, his jumping didn't stand up, and it was an untidy. The only thing he did do is he then finished very, very strongly. We did have a few issues with him afterwards, and had to, with all some very good physios and backmen and everybody, they found plenty wrong and put that back together again. The only obvious thing to do was up him in trip again and tried him over 3, and that did work well. And I think that was a good performance. I've always thought Ahoy Senior was a very high-class horse. It must have been gutting for them that he had that fall in the Gold Cup, because Lucinda and Skew, let alone us, didn't know what was going to happen there. It would have been I think it would have been very interesting. and he goes a good gallop, and so he set Shishkin a fair task. One moment we looked in trouble, but the next minute we were comfortably off and away, which is really good because at least now as 8, with Jonbon and Shishkin, we know we finished the season knowing exactly where we're going to start next season.
So the early season target, would it be the King George for Shishkin?
Well, you've got the Betfair and the King George, haven't you? Or, yes, they're the obvious races, and you hope that he slots into there.
I mean, I saw you when he won the Ascot Chase, and I could see how much sort of pleasure you got from, because a lot of people were very quick to say, Shishkin, he was a good.
Well,
good
they write them off as
Arkle
quick
winner.
as they build them up and knock
Yeah.
them down, don't
Yeah.
they? And he was getting, we had 2 disappointments, and he's on the dustbin. But we've been through all that before. Yeah. We can live with these things, and hopefully we can repair them.
Does he show you much at home in work? Is he
No,
quite
nothing.
exuberant
He's
work
hard
boss?
to. Nico's very good. He sits on him quite a bit, and he can tell me when we're right.
Okay. Let's just talk a bit about a few of the other sort of real smart performers and how well they did for you last term. Luccia, I mean, she was a filly that she ran well in the mares, also ran well at Aintree as well. Again, you've spoken before about how she almost lost her life. So the fact she was able to come back and do what she did, again, great testament to her as a racehorse.
Yeah, she's a tough mare. Yeah, she didn't quite. She was a bit unlucky there. I mean, she won her first 2 hurdle races, very impressive in that listed race at Exeter. And then we just had a little blip before Cheltenham. She just had a dirty track wash. It didn't take a lot of clearing up, but I just felt it sort of took the edge off her a little bit at Aintree, because she looked as if she'd come to win the race, really. I'm looking forward to starting again, because I think if we go back to the beginning and go back to what she was, in her first 2 races, I think she was better than she was. Just the 2 that really mattered. But let's get her back there and hope she is.
So you wouldn't be looking at going over offensive with her next
No,
year?
No, she's a hurdler.
Okay. Champ, a horse who's always done well. If you always know you're going to get a decent win from him at some stage, and wasn't disgraced at Aintree last time. Again, he's just been a good servant for you down the years, isn't he?
He has. He began the year, we really kept him. JP always felt that he was a better horse fresh, and he won. There was a great race at Newbury with Paisley Park.
Yeah.
And we decided that we'd literally put him away, miss the stayers at Cheltenham, and keep him for Aintree. Okay, it didn't work, but he's a lovely horse, and he's just a pleasure to have around the place. He's won over fences. He's been very good. Once upon a time, I hoped that he was a Gold Cup horse, but he's had his issues. His back is his biggest problem. He's had surgery both the last 2 summers. I don't know if there's anything more we can do to him now, but he's back at home with Ger Kelly, who's the vet that's always dealt with these issues, and I'm sure he'll do whatever he deems necessary.
And I suppose we should just reflect on Mr. Coffey, who didn't disgrace himself at all. I bet for a minute you thought, oh my God, I'm going to get this Grand National finally.
Yeah, I've got to agree. There was a moment when you thought, blimey, it was all looking too good to be true, to be honest with you. He was jumping like it. I mean, going back from all the way down from the Canal Turn, Valentine's, 3 out, crossing the Melling Road. He's sailing along, just jumping like an aeroplane, and looked as if he was in pretty good control of the whole situation. Unfortunately, his sort of legs went to jelly in the end, but it was exciting, I must admit. But there was a bit of sadness. Yes, because there had been a moment when you thought, blimey, this is too good to be true. It was too good to be true. Yeah.
You had a few seconds when you thought you might win that. Win that. Even I thought you might win it.
Well, it was lovely. It was good to watch, and everybody said that was a great try. And I know Lady Bamford, and they're essentially a flat operation with a few jumpers, and I think it gave them a great thrill too. So it was, it was good fun at the time. I was a bit gutted for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Just turning away from that, there's only, I suppose, there's a lot.
It's still a maiden of Avengers anyway.
Would it? I mean, will the national be the target again next year?
You're
aiming towards that.
You've got to. You'd have to.
Yeah. Caribbean Boy, nice to see him get his head back in front at the
he won a
meeting.
good race there. Yeah. He's always been a hard horse to get a handle on. When he's good, he's very good. He's always in the garage for
MOTs
various MOTs. Yeah.
Under Control, she won at the meeting, and then she followed up with a very easy success at Sandown. I mean, I know you all train them like good horses, but will you train her sort of like a proper Grade 1 performer for next year?
Well, you'd have to start thinking about it. She's a sweet little filly. When she arrived here, I couldn't say, you didn't walk into the box and say, wow. She looked small and very red, filly. Blimey. Anyway, she was very good at Newbury the first time. We threw her in very deep into Cheltenham. And at least that was her third run, and she had a mark. So we brought her into a couple of handicaps, and it paid off very nicely. She won 2 very valuable prizes and looked very good doing it. She should have a lot of improvement in her, you'd think. She'd only been over from France a short time. She'd gone up to APs for a bit of a break. When she arrived over here, she'd won a little race in France, so she wasn't a novice. So for next year, so we had to kick on. No, she's great. I mean, she surprised us, I must admit. But nice surprises are all good things.
If we just talk more broadly over the season as a whole, as I said, you sort of almost £2.7 million in prize money, second in the title. Do you find nowadays, with a lot of the horses staying over in Ireland and so many more trainers setting up shop, that it's sort of harder and harder to try and keep yourself at that top level?
It is. You've got to be lucky. You've got to have good horses, haven't you? And that's where we are lucky. JP's been very good to us over the years, and although Epatante's probably coming into her twilight zone, might even get a stud. You've got Jonbon coming along. We've got Chantry House to come back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I always thought he was a high-class horse. And then you've got, the likes of the filly there and things we're talking about. He's kept us incredibly strong, if you like, with a number of high-class horses coming in. Obviously, at the same time, we were downed a bit, but I could fully understand what Simon and Isaac are trying to do, and I'm afraid
because of course they have a lot of their horses over.
We were our firepower was well dented by the fact that they now have nearly the majority of their horses in Ireland, and also actually Mike Gregg too. There was Iron Maximus we had here and horses like that. They all went to Ireland, all for much the same reason, really. That it was for their circumstances. It was tax efficient. Nothing to do with the prize money. Nothing to do with anybody. It was just for their own reasons, because their situations made it more sensible for them to have their horses in Ireland. So we actually got quite dented through that. So with that, quite a number of your best horses not coming back in left a bit of a hole. So overall, it was good. And 1 or 2 new faces have come on board, which is really nice. And they've become good friends, nice horses, and they're the future. I know Simon will always have some to play with here, and we're great mates.
I suppose it's a game. I mean, no matter how long you've been training, you've still got to try and attract new owners to bring new horses. You've still got to evolve with the way perhaps you may change the way you trained your horses from 20 or 30 years ago. I've seen you've got new sort of gallops in, and it's always change, isn't it? Just to try and make sure that you are still at the top.
You have to, yeah. You've got to keep your finger on the pulse and keep up with the modern times. Just because you're a bit older doesn't mean you can't. There are new things happening all the time. There's new. It's sourcing these horses is the difficulty. Finding them, and I mean, there's no doubt that what Willie's been doing is phenomenal. But what he has done, he's got a brilliant way of. He collects horses like people collect stamps, and the prices are pretty terrifying. A market that we can seldom play in, but every now and then, and actually the other owner obviously comes to mind is Joe Donnelly, who's become a great supporter. He has horses with Willie and us, and he's the most fantastic man. Lovely, just a pleasure. And he's quite new to us. In the Shishkin was his first horse, and he's got some lovely young ones, and he has a lot of lovely horses with Willie as well. So as I say, we've got plenty of new blood, but as it's finding that you can have the far part to go and buy horses. It's finding them is the difficult thing. Whether be it in France or in Ireland, you need. It's difficult. Certainly, those Irish pointers, they've gone. They win the race and they're sold in the Bunce Handing enclosure, where we can't be. But same in France. If you've got to pounce quickly.
Do you think that's like detrimental to race in the UK now? Do you think it's going to continue to go that way, or
well, it
will
makes
there be
it quite a bit harder
stage?
for us to compete with those certain other people who have got the ammo, and B, they're on the spot. It's easier for them to. They probably had their eye on all these horses for quite some time. We know nothing about them until we watch the point to point. By the time I've watched the point to point and got somebody to take a picture of it, the thing's sold.
I suppose you were lucky in a way that JP was quite interested in Jonbon when he was sold at Yorton.
Oh, he was. I mean, there was no doubt that they knew all about Jonbon. He asked me to go and have a look at him at Yorton, and I can't say I was utterly convinced, but I mean, he was. He was a grand type of horse. You somehow got to see these horses and imagine what they're going to look like in 6 months' time, not what they actually are there and then. And I mean, where we were very lucky is that because he was sold in England, it made sense for him to stay in England for VAT purposes. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have gone to Ireland and he'd be with, he'd been at Willie's because he had his full brother. So we were very lucky there.
Just finally, obviously about a month ago, or no, less than that, a couple of weeks ago, it was announced the changes to the pattern by the BHA. There's going to be a few races dropped and a few races moved and so forth. Anything significant after those announcements that you've got an opinion on either way? I know the Tolworth, of course, has been moved now to
I can't work that
Aintree.
one out. I really can't have that one. That is bizarre. The Tolworth's a proper Grade 1 hurdle that belongs where it is, not at Aintree. There's nothing wrong with Aintree, but not on Boxing Day. The only other meeting you need on Boxing Day was Huntingdon, where you could afford to send some lesser horses, and you got some, but all the top jockeys are going to be at Kempton, and you suddenly have a Grade 1 up there. I thought that was madness. Simple madness.
Because that's a race, of course, you've got a good record in, like the Constitution one.
But I very much doubt we'll be running it in this year.
They've dropped a few other races. I know that the Dipper, for example, from Cheltenham.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, all the good races are going, but unfortunately, okay, we're lucky that we do have a number of Grade 1 horses. So our main thing, but that herd is so small, and I appreciate there aren't very many runners in them. But if you keep taking them out of the programme, they're going to be less and less, because where on earth are these horses going to go? And there's only, you could, if you take Constitution Hill, in fact, luckily next year, the one thing that I believe might happen is that the international hurdle will go to Trials Day. So actually, it gives Constitution Hill another race, if we want it. So he could actually appear 5 times if everything went well, and he stays over hurdles. But that's a help. But if you've got that sort of horse, but taking all just every year, they're chipping away and taking away the novice chases. They're all becoming novice handicaps, and it's not a good incentive for people to go novice chasing, because the horses haven't got the opportunities. There was not another race Jonbon could have run in. Didn't. I mean, we were struggling at the time. We went to the Kingmaker because that was the only possible race he could have had between the Henry VIII and Cheltenham. That's it.
Well, I suppose you can see what the BHA are trying to do. They are, because we are seeing too many 3 and 4 runner Grade 1. So I suppose if there's less of them, it may just mean that everyone will come together a little bit more.
You will, and you probably wreck each other on the way. And God, it's going to be less horses. If you keep beating each other up every time, then the beaten up are going to get, and it was a bit like Epatante this year. I mean, she could only, just chasing Constitution Hill didn't really, I'm not saying it did her any harm. She came out and won a nice Grade 3, I think it was, or a race up at North.
Yeah.
When Nico rode her, and she was very impressive. So you can't say that Constitution Hill knocked, because we were looking after her pretty well behind Constitution. She wasn't going to get there. She wasn't going to get a particularly hard race just to finish second. She finished comfortable second both times. She was never going to beat him. But at least it proves we were brave enough JP was brave enough to take it on and say, well, look, the prize money is very good. Where else can you go? Marie's Rock, we couldn't get her out until New Year's Day. There wasn't a race to run her in. It's frustrating. If you've got we are lucky to have the good horses. The moderate horses, you go where you like. There's any amount of races for them. But it makes it difficult.
Well, great to talk to you. Finished. That's a wrap. Done it now. Good season last year. Let's hope it's a case of onwards and upwards next year. And maybe you can regain your championship crown. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, I should think we've been first and second between us nearly every year for about 10 or 12 years. So, as I say, we've managed to wrestle it away from him a couple of times. And we won't sort of give up trying. Got to get going earlier, I think.